This is a poem entitled Lotto by Tom Waits. Every now and then, the world just makes sense. Every now and then, the world makes sense. A melody is formed by 8 random tones. A monkey at a typewriter composes a poem, and a homeless man walks into a 7-Eleven, plays his mother's birthday on the lotto, and wins $1 million. Every now and then, the world just makes sense.
Says what he wants, but he's ever contradicted. He's a man of conviction, but he's never been convicted.
Hello, people. Thank you for tuning in. This is Matthew Goss, and I'm going to be your host. Welcome to Man of Conviction. Today on the show, we have Petey Hentrich. He's an editor friend of mine. I've known him for many, many years. Very fun guy. First, I'm going to update you on what's been going on with me. It's a request by some people. And as you may have heard me mention on several podcasts, my plans to go to Denmark and do a travel diary type show where I attempt to learn the language in 30 days. Well, guess what? I've decided, upon further investigation and a sense of realistic expectations, that I've decided Danish is not the one to do in 30 days. I know I feel like I'm chickening out, but it is notoriously difficult to pronounce. Notorious. I mean, Swedish and Norwegian are definitely easier to pronounce and learn. So I've heard. So, well, why do I do those? Well, because I had a place to stay in Denmark, and I think I'm going to try something else. It's just a challenge I don't think I can pull off. And, some of you might know that I did a semester in Paris in 1990, and I did a semester in Madrid in 93, where I met Elena, my wife. And, my French and Spanish are not bad. I wouldn't say I'm fluent. I like to say that I'm proficient. Anyway, people know that Spanish is not the only language spoken in Spain, right? What we call Spanish, they call Castilian, or Castellano, because they like to distinguish between the Catalonian or Catalan, the Galician or Gallego, or the Basque language, which they call Euskera. These are like distinct languages that are spoken there. So I think I want to try to learn Catalan. It's an interesting language that's it's kind of a mix between French and Spanish and Italian. There's similarities with all those languages, but it is indeed its own language, and it's interesting. I've sort of, looked into it years ago, but I think it would be really fun to dive in and see how far I can get in 30 days. So I think there's enough time to course correct, being that I want to do this in May. So I'm looking forward to that. I'm going to do my best to stay away from the politics of the region because, hopefully that's all going to pass over. So some of you, wanted to hear more about me, so there you go. Now I'm going to get letters saying maybe pull back a little bit on that, maybe less. Anyway, Petey Hentrich, Petey, as we call him. We met on the Keenan Ivory Weigh-In show, and we've always kept in touch, and we play poker every so often, and I really enjoy his perspective on things and his infectious laugh. So let's go to his interview right now. We are here with Petey Hentrich.
Greetings and salutations.
I'm pronouncing your last name.
You are, actually.
Yeah, thank you. It's not a ch at the end.
No, it's a ch with a hard K sound, right, like in Middle Germany.
Right. And you are of Middle German descent.
Somewhat.
Yeah.
Ancestry keeps changing.
Yeah,
my results.
Me too.
I became a lot less Swedish recently.
Yeah, I think I became more Norwegian, and I got 2% more Ashkenazi Jew than I had before.
Oh, well, that's wild.
Yeah, it just keeps changing. You never know.
On one of those Ancestry shows, they had Larry David and Bernie Sanders on, and it turned out that they were both
related, cousins or something.
Cousins.
Crazy. You are an editor.
Yes.
And a producer.
At times.
On occasion. But you made your bones and bread and butter pretty strictly as an editor.
That's right.
Yeah, since the mid-20s, right? Your mid-20s?
Yeah, actually early 20s. I made my first edit in school in 92 and had my first full-time professional editing job in 93.
Nice. Yeah, me too, 93. That's when it finally happened. as an editor, I'd like to share something that happened to me very recently.
Oh, yeah?
As in last night. I got called by my friend at 7:30 or 8 o'clock last night. He's saying, hey, listen, this guy's calling me. I've worked with him before. He's a DP. He shot some stuff for the Golden Globes. They need to put together, I heard a montage, like a 3-minute montage. That's what I heard. And they want it by tomorrow morning. So I talked to the guy, and it turns out they don't want a montage. They want it like an EPK, sort of like just a string out of all the best shots so they can give it to the news, right?
Yeah.
There was a lot of footage, like a lot of footage. Plus my system, it took me a little bit to kind of get going, but I did get going. And at 5:30 in the morning, I realized I still have half of the footage to go through, and I've got this rough string out that I need to go back and edit, and then they want to color correct this too. And they wanted it by 8 a.m.
Yeah.
It became impossible. There was way too much footage.
Yeah.
I stay up all night. All night.
Yeah.
I get an hour and a half sleep in the morning. I get up and talk to the guy. He looks at the little 15-minute string out I sent him, which is really only half the stuff. And he's like, oh, it's pretty shoddy. It's like, yeah. I was like, well, yeah, I just wanted to show you what I did in this amount of time. And I'm just running out of time, I think. And he goes, all right, can you take the drives over to this other editor? I'm going to give you his name. And he has a more robust system, and he can probably handle it. I was like, okay.
Yeah.
So I copied the Resolve file over and took the drives over, not too far. Basically, the guy's like, listen, you failed at you didn't do it, and you said you could, and, I'm not going to pay you. So anyway, I negotiated a fee, which is less than my day rate. And I totally failed. Was not able to accomplish this task. I said, it's like asking me to go to San Diego in 20 minutes. Take a car and go to San Diego in 20 minutes. I guess it's possible, but you're going to have to break some laws and people are going to die.
And people really shouldn't die for the Golden Globes.
No. What would you do in that situation?
Well, it's interesting. There was once a class that I took back in college at Full Sail University in Orlando where the set designer guy gave us a really tough task, and there was just no time to do it. And he said, nobody passes this. But here I am. I'm your client, and I'm giving you this assignment. Go. And I came really close to getting it done.
Right.
But I failed because the lesson was to tell the client no. But and that's a very important lesson.
Yeah.
But in your circumstance, you didn't have the knowledge ahead of time of how much footage this was going to be, and that they had unreasonable expectations for the time frame that allowed, especially with equipment that they were not providing.
Yeah, so I guess I could have pulled the plug earlier and said, there's no way I'm going to get this done, and he maybe could have.
But the professional thing to do is to do as much as you can, as fast as you can, and do as good a job as you can.
Right. And at least get some of your day rate you negotiated, right?
Yeah, I charge by the hour, so I'm going to get my hourly rate no matter what. And if you're not going to give me my hourly rate,
then I'm not working for you.
Well, yeah,
right.
And I'm going to do what I can to get my hourly rate.
Right. Anyway, thanks for letting me get that off my chest.
Oh no! After you've been up all night, I imagine
I'm frazzled.
This might be on the forefront of your mind.
Yeah. But I'm going to get a little something out of it, and I did blow it. So I wasn't able to perform.
Well, you got them a good portion of the way there.
Yeah.
I mean, they weren't starting from scratch.
Well,
and if they were starting from scratch,
that was their fault because I already provided a 15-minute sequence that he could have worked off of if he opened a DaVinci, which I've never cut on before.
Oh yeah.
And it's a little different, but I made it work.
Yeah. I hate using anything but Avid. Just hate it.
I'm okay with Premiere these days. I got to be honest. I've come to be fine with it. It's not the same, but Avid is my true love, like for sure. Yeah.
I don't want to be a hired gunslinger and walk in with my strut and know that I can do anything that they want, and then sit in front of Premiere and not be able to deliver.
Yeah, I agree.
Because I like to know where all the ammo is. You know what I'm saying?
Yep.
I don't want to have a vision in my mind that I can't recreate with the tools that I know in Premiere.
Totally. Let's talk about the Keenan Ivory Wayans show.
Oh, yes.
Shall we? That was a fucking trench warfare, wasn't it?
I have a ton of nostalgia for that show because it was sort of the first big show I worked on, where it was showing every night, and it felt like a big production.
Yeah.
And we were, alongside the studio where everything was happening, and there was a lot of coming and going on the studio, in the actual studio. So that was great. I liked being on a lot for the first time, really.
Yeah.
I dug a lot of things about that show, and it's still a great gig in my head, because I'd start out every day, and I'd be cutting the open for the show,
Right.
and then the next ons, and then I'd get to do something funny, some kind of sketch in the afternoon, and that really made the day fly by. There was always something different, and I enjoy comedy more than anything else.
Totally.
Now, I do remember that show shutting down at times because we had very important things going on. South Park, the Spirit of Christmas,
Right.
I believe, was the very first thing that they ever did, and that would take over the dub rack at times because it was viral, and the way that you spread viral videos at that time was you made VHS copies and handed them to people.
Right.
And that's what we were doing. That thing was running nonstop in there. That was it seemed to be more a priority than the show at times to make sure everybody got one of those for Christmas, because it was such a phenomenon.
Yeah.
It was something unlike anybody'd ever seen, and it was dastardly funny, and you had to get a copy of it. And the fact that it was bootleg kind of made it cool too.
Totally. Yeah, that was. Those were good times.
It was mostly good times. There was a director there who we won't name.
Oh, yeah.
Who literally, people quit the show because they had to work with her. Her assistant ran off.
Yeah.
When there was another editor who was working on the show before me, and they brought me in on a weekend to see if I could work with this producer, to see if that was at all manageable, because apparently the other editor was having trouble, and every editor was having trouble working with this person.
Yeah, I believe she made me so mad once that I barked at her.
You barked at her like a dog. Yes.
Just because I felt like that would have been that she would understand that somehow. I don't know.
It was really twisted.
Yeah.
With this lady. I mean, one of the big things in television when you have a deadline is to be decisive. And instead of being decisive, she would have come up with excuses and blame people, and try to get in fights with you about things. And it was untenable.
I remember there were lots of calisthenics on the floor during edit sessions.
That person went on to return to choreography, and choreographed what was the Ringling Brothers, Barnum and Bailey Greatest Show on Earth.
Oh, okay.
Quite a different job than producing sketches on the Keenan Ivory Wayne show.
I remember her being exasperated at times in the edit bay, going, I usually make $2,500 a day as a choreographer, and I have to be doing this.
Yeah.
I heard that a couple of times from her. Yeah.
Yeah. She was a peach.
Yep.
I ran into somebody who worked with her later, and who was one of her friends, and I'm like, "You mean her? That sort of looks like a chicken?" And he was aghast, because he'd never seen that side of her. He'd never had to work with her, and
Maybe she saw somebody, got some medication.
Well, she quit the business. She was out of television.
Okay.
For what that's worth, but yeah. Well, we could all use a little more medication.
This is true. This is definitely true. You have a cool house in the hills. You're kind of living the dream, as the Hollywood. We were talking about it off air. You were smart with the real estate situation early on.
Yeah, I was very much into getting into a house as soon as I could. And I squirreled away every penny I could since the minute I hit town. And then I went out and I bought a house that I couldn't afford, that took me 3 mortgages to get. 2 mortgages, plus I overdrafted my account, something fierce.
Oh, man.
And then I went about squirreling away every penny again, and working every job, saying yes to every job 6-7 days a week for years.
Yeah.
And squirreled away that money, and was able to get the house refied into a 15-year mortgage within a couple years, and with that big nut to pay off, I was working enough that it turned out to be okay. And
Yeah.
I was able to pay it off a few years ago, and hopefully, well, it's a fallback plan at this point. If the editing job goes away, if all of a sudden, they have, they get to that paradigm shift where people in India will be able to edit just as accessibly as me, but for $2 an hour.
Yeah.
Things are really going to change. And when
Yeah.
that happens, I want to be able to rent out my house here so I can go work in India for $2 an hour.
There you go. Yeah, there is a shift that has taken place over the years. When we were in it, editors were getting pretty good money, and I would say in some cases that's dropped off by 75%.
Wow.
I've seen people offering edit jobs, looking for people with many years experience and wanting to pay less than what an assistant editor used to get when we were doing it. It's insane what is happening to post-production.
Yeah, the big jobs are still there. What I find is that I keep falling into decent paying jobs, but they're still run by, in a lot of unfortunate circumstances, by people who are used to working in the lower tiers, and that is not the quality of people that you want to work for.
Yeah.
You don't want people who resent that you're making a lot of money because they've been on productions where the editors aren't paid that much, or you're making more money than them, which is very often the case.
Yeah.
As an editor. So that's been a bit of a stumbling block for me at times, because you're just not working with great people all the time. But I've been on some great big shows, where it's union work and they pay really well and everybody's on.
Yeah.
Everybody's on it. I've been on shows where we did such a good job, we had to wrap early
Wow.
because we
There's
were
nothing
just
to
that
do.
far ahead. Yeah.
That's great. I remember once you came in and saved my ass. There was this job in Culver City that was in a little half
yes.
room, and it was awful in there. Plus the room, they kept coming in and out to go into the other editor's bay.
Yes, you had to walk through your bay
Yeah.
to get to another editor's bay.
And the air conditioner, when it was on, was very loud.
It was loud.
And you had to you work with headphones, most likely, if you wanted to. They did have a stand-up desk. I remember that. But I think I was either 1 or 2 days, and I was like, oh, my God, I cannot do this. And I called you, and you were like, you know what? This one thing I was going to do just fell through. I'm available, and I know David. And so I went and talked to David, and I was like, listen, can I Petey, remember Petey? He's available. He's willing to come in. He said he would come in tomorrow. I don't mean to sound like such a prima donna here, but I can't work in these circumstances. I slightly regret it because it was a fun show, right? It was fun material to cut, and it was.
But the commute was brutal.
It was brutal.
It's an hour there and back, and it's all start and stop traffic the whole time. You average like 3 miles an hour, which is really frustrating. Some days it was 90 minutes, and the fastest way to do it was to go through side streets. It was just nauseating. But that gig actually worked out well for me.
You rolled into some Scientology.
I rolled into the Scientology show,
Right.
Leah Remini,
Right.
Scientology in the Aftermath. And that show ended up winning an Emmy.
Yeah.
So you can sort of say that I won an Emmy. You can say I was on an Emmy-winning show.
Yeah.
Which, that's pretty cool.
It is pretty cool.
I've been on much better shows that got far fewer accolades.
I can say that, too, about the Osbournes.
Oh, yeah. That was a touchstone show. It's such a big deal. I watched a documentary about that this past week.
Oh, yeah?
About how, I guess it was the 2000s on CNN spent about a 5-minute segment just covering the Osbournes, talking about how it was a touchstone of television. It was the first celeb-reality show.
Right, family.
A docu-follow of a celebrity.
Right.
But you were on a number of big touchstone shows in that era. I mean, you were on the first season of Big Brother, weren't you?
Correct. Yeah.
And that's a big deal. That was
Yeah, that was cool. The Dutch people were still running it at that point. I mean, their format that they had in Europe, they brought, and it ended up changing the next year because it was too like a science experiment. They would, let shots go for 2 minutes of somebody smoking in the backyard after they just had a fight with their boyfriend in there.
Yeah.
And American, attention spans cannot handle such things. So we have to have flashbacks and interviews that explain it, because they didn't have any of that in the original show. Yeah. And then they decided, let's make it where we call them into the diary room a lot and we get them to talk about what just happened or what do they think of this person.
And now the show's entirely driven by interview.
Yeah. Yeah. Julie Chen and the 10 house.
Julie Chen Moonves.
Right. That's right.
She doubled down on that this year.
She added the name.
She added the name Moonves in support of her husband when he hit Sticky Waters.
Yes, he did. He's no longer with CBS, is he?
Oh, is that? I'm not sure about that.
Yeah. Goodness gracious. Tell me some interesting edit stories. When you go back home and you're talking to your friends that are not in the industry and they're like, Petey, tell me some Hollywood stuff. And you say, I got some stories for you. I know there may be a pornography related story.
I do have a pornography adjacent story. What it was is when I first got to town, I cut some promos over at KCAL. I had a buddy who knew a buddy who got me in over there. And then they immediately got sold, so I was out looking for work, and I got a job at the lowest end post house in Hollywood, a place called Concept Plus that's no longer around. And I got to work the night shift there. And that was, and the way I got that gig was I was the first guy down at the 7-Eleven the day that the trade magazines came out with the one ads. So at 5 a.m, I walk 2 blocks down to the 7-Eleven. I buy my Hollywood Reporter. I go home and I'm using my super duper computer and my dial-up modem. I faxed my resume and cover letter to them. So mine was the first one sitting in the fax machine when they got there. And sure enough, they called me and I got the job. But
smart.
They did a lot of promos for Playboy TV. And so you'd occasionally be with someone who was from Playboy who'd done a lot of porn work. Well, this one guy I was working with for the day, he was telling us a story. He's like, yeah, I was cutting some porn at home and I'm working on this scene for a while and it's getting late and I've been at it for a while, and all of a sudden I hear bang, bang, bang on the door. And I'm like, what is it? What is it? And it's the neighbor. He's like, it's been 4 hours. Finish her off already.
That's hilarious.
I was once at a party, and I was talking to some friends, and then I heard the other conversation that was happening around the coffee table. It was somebody who was working on the show When Good Pets Go Bad. That was the name of the show. I was like, oh my God, you worked on that show. That's amazing. They called me and wanted me to edit the show. What did they want you to do? He's like, they wanted me to find the bad pets. It's a conversation you only have in Hollywood.
That's a good one. We've played many games of poker.
That we have.
Yeah. I've been coming to your place to play poker over the past
20 years,
Could
probably.
it be 20? Yeah.
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah. There's one coming up I think I would like to attend.
Oh, yeah. Well, we'll try to make that all happen. Hopefully we can schedule enough guys. It's mostly editors, so there's a fair amount of kibitzing that goes on about the ins and outs of Hollywood, the blue-collar grunts working their lives below the line.
Yep. I will be amazed if I get an edit job this year that I like.
Oh, my. That's a dark thing to say, Matthew.
I'm telling you. It's true.
You've been really happening into some crap gigs, huh?
Yeah. But, people know I was on The Tonight Show for almost 10 years and got in the DGA and was making all that dough. And so people mostly like, fuck him. He had a good run. So I think there's a bit of that.
Well, I wonder if a lot of it, too, is that, like me, you were in the studio system for more than 10 years, and that didn't allow you to sow the seeds of the freelance market in the same way that many of our contemporaries have been able to.
Indeed.
I mean, you were at NBC for
almost 10.
It was almost 10.
Yeah.
I was at NBC for 8, and then immediately at Warner Brothers for 6. So a lot of my contemporaries I see who are working, just one union gig after another, and on these big shiny floor shows, and I'm struggling to get those gigs booked. And I'm like, I know I'm better than a lot of these dudes, but it's just the fact that I was out of the running for all those years and wasn't constantly going through the turnover. Turnover's great for business.
Yeah.
Show gets shut down, and immediately all those people who were on the show, provided you were nice to them, are scattered to the winds and are looking to hire editors at some point or another, or refer somebody.
Yep.
So the more shows you can be on, the better the turnover goes, and the easier it is for you to get future gigs. And I think some of that is what can cause you and I some consternation at times, and that we're not always getting the gigs that we want or as steady a work as we would like.
Yeah. Yeah, you've really have a astute analysis of the situation.
Now, of late, I've found myself doing almost no docu-reality and doing a lot of game shows and comedy specials. And I love me some game shows because they're always fun, it's always upbeat, and usually you're cutting down from having too much material.
Right.
And that's good.
Yes.
Because going the other way stinks. Trying to make something out of nothing. It's like, oh, well, these two people, they drive from here to there and they talk, but they don't really cover the subject that we're talking about. So just sort of make it work. And then you're writing interview bites that to make this drive seem interesting, where they never said where they were going or why they were going there. Or, the tedium of docu-reality stuff. When you don't have the material, can be just brutal. And I don't miss a whole lot of that. I do love cutting stand-up comedy. I've learned so much about cutting it from Troy Miller at Dakota Pictures, who I've been working with on some big comedy specials. We did Jeff Dunham and Kathy Griffin this past year.
I think I know Troy.
And what he's taught me about coverage and when to cut to certain cameras totally changed what I was doing a couple years ago. And it really has become a shorthand between us to where he doesn't have to tell me what camera to go to anymore.
What based on the structure of the joke and also based on the physicality of the person, right? Like,
it's actually mostly about geography. It's about establishing where the audience is at the end of that last joke, even though you're not necessarily showing them. You know, the most you really want to see is the back of people's heads, really.
Right.
But you want to be back, so you want to have a wide shot from back in the crowd, and then from there you want to cut in closer, and then if the if the comedian starts to move, you want to cut to the low camera of where they're walking towards. But in order to get to that camera, you have to cut somewhere in between from the wide camera to that camera. So you probably want to go medium close in between. And then once you're on the low camera to one side, you're going to want to go back medium tight on the stage to get over to the medium low camera on the other side. So it's perpetually changing geography to accentuate where the comedian is walking with their jokes and covering up the seams that are happening, because you're always having to pull up the comedy to either make the joke hit harder or, we cut out 20, 30. In Kathy Griffin's show, we cut out 50% of the content. Yeah. And you have to make those seams work while still having cameras aimed at the same person.
Sometimes you do have to go to that couple laughing in the audience.
And that's great, except that a lot of people don't like audience shots anymore. If you look at what's trending in stand-up comedy, you'll see the back of people's heads, but you'll never see the front of them. And that makes it very difficult to cut around. One of the biggest things that you hope for is that they get a shot from the stage, from behind the comedian, which is a great, gorgeous shot where you can see their perspective and you see the audience beyond them, but you're looking at the back of the comedian. That's where you get a lot of your edits are happening, or on the comedian's back.
You can put words in their mouth there to connect and get back around.
Exactly, yeah. Trying to pull all together, because it's really about audio. I mean, we're talking about editing as if it's a visual medium, but almost everything we do is driven by audio.
Yeah, I always, when I brought that concept up, it's like we call it the radio cut, right?
Yes.
You just close your eyes, and does it sound right?
Exactly.
Then you put the picture on.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. Yeah. And that's how I cut everything from promos to.
I recall seeing your timeline once, and I noticed how you would keep a lot of extra video up on 3 and 4 and 5 that aren't even turned on, the video channels, above. And
For me, editing is the quickest part of my day. Logging and finding the shots is the big part of the day. I can do a promo for a TV show where I may spend, 3-4 hours on a half-hour episode. But then when it comes time to edit, I'm going to do the edit in 20 minutes.
Right.
Because I know where everything is.
Right.
And I've marked it as I was going. Like I will subclip little visuals that I like, and I'll label those in lowercase. And any sound ups that I get that I like are in uppercase, so I can scan through my polls bin very quickly and see
what's what. Is this
see
a
what's
visual
what.
or is this an audio thing? And
Right.
you
And
just need it. That's great.
I'm editing from the bin.
Right.
I'm looking at the bin and I'm editing like a word processing document.
Right.
And that's what we do. Is the edit systems are really just visual word processing systems.
Yeah.
They work cut paste same way.
I worked on this show early on called Naked Cafe. It was on VH1.
Uh-huh.
And it wasn't the first show, but it was one of the first shows to take high-res material out of the Avid, spit it on a digibeta, and that was the master.
Yeah.
And the post guy thought, I'm going to assemble all these cuts that have 200 cuts per episode, these fast little segments. I'm going to assemble those all in the Avid and then just take like 9 pieces of video and put them together with the title and the interstitials. And so when he would do his online, he would have 9 edits instead of 900 edits. It was AVR 26.
Yes.
And it was
Avid Video Resolution 26.
Yes. They allowed it on TV. That they said, okay, the specs are acceptable enough that you can output out of this computer, and we will put it on the air. So
and
that
AVR
was the breakthrough.
25, 26, and 27 were really the first times anybody was allowing that to happen, and that was a big paradigm change in television,
Yep.
where the people who aired the television said, yeah, that's good enough.
Yep.
It's as good as the 3/4 inch tape we've been using.
Yep.
The thing is, it looked different. 3/4 inch tape, it just gets fuzzy, and maybe you get a little double edging around the edges of people's faces
Right.
and whatnot. But that's different looking than digital artifacting, where if you put this is how you could really tell it was AVR 26, is you'd put a white title over black, and you would see artifacting all around the outside of the lettering.
Right.
And that's what was really being objected to, is you could really see that stuff when it got broadcast.
That gave it away.
It gave it away, and it made it wasn't worse, but it was different.
Yeah.
And it wasn't any better.
Yeah. People did have to get used to it.
Yeah, there was a bit of a come to Jesus type of thing that happened there.
A lot of old editor types were like, damn you kids, what are you doing to me?
And then people got stricter with resolutions and what they would accept. I remember for a while, Discovery Channel was just brutal. They'd bounce everything back at you. The smaller cable networks they would all fail quality control on a regular basis when you sent your work to them. I remember hearing a story at one point where, because the standards people were so tight about what was being accepted for broadcast, that the engineers couldn't make them happy, so they ended up sending a signal to a monitor, and then they stuck a camera in front of the monitor.
Wow.
And the camera shot the monitor, and then that way they would have control over what the video looked like, even if the video was bad. It would at least work specs-wise, which is a horrible, unbelievable way to do things, but that's as bad as it got at one point.
Wow. And when you look at 4x3 TV clips from back in the day, we accepted that as, okay. And now look at 4K and 8K, and the quality has come so far.
It's really been something. But, what made it more acceptable back then was that it was as good as we could do.
Right.
And it was as good as anything that was out there.
Right.
I mean, I remember, in the 90s, we were coveting the guy's Ikegami camera out there, because it had gorgeous tubes, and it could still give you a good, give you good color off of it, and it had a nice warm look to it as opposed to chip cameras.
Yeah, well, let's wrap it up.
Okay, that sounds great.
It was really great to talk to you. This was kind of technical for people, which is good. So any editors out there will appreciate this probably more than others. But,
which is really weird considering I'm not a technical guy at all, but that's sort of where our conversation went.
You got very technical, Pete. You are a technical guy. Thank you so much for coming.
Oh, my pleasure. Good to see you, Matthew.
That was Petey Hentrich. We got kind of technical there, but hopefully you learned something and you got a couple of laughs. Well, next week on the show, Rebecca Donahue, comedian, producer, director, writer. I met her recently. We totally hit it off, and we chatted about all kinds of stuff. Please tune in for that. If you've gotten this far, I'm going to ask you to please send me some suggestions or complaints, whatever you got, to manofconvictionpodcast@gmail.com. This is where you can get a hold of me, or go to the website manofconvictionpodcast.com and become a patron. You'll get some cool stickers and a shout out, so do it. Ciao for now.